The Jeremiah Patterson Show is about news, politics, and history. Podcasting is something that I really do enjoy doing. It's like a hobby. I get to go off on the weekends and podcast, and I have time to script out my show and to create a podcast that my listeners enjoy. And so my listeners can share that information with others and divulge that information amongst themselves. But Anchor is a really useful app for podcasting. I mean, it's 100% free. You have lots of interesting and free techniques inside the Anchor app that you can use for your podcast. And when you put it all together, it just makes your content sound really good and really professional. Anchor is a one stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcasts. Best of all, it is 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise your podcasts. That's pretty amazing. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast and you don't know where to start, just start here at anchor.fm/start. Once again, that is anchor.fm/start. Happy podcasting. Welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, and thank you for joining me on this Wednesday. I know I said I wasn't going to be posting any more episodes until July 19th, which is the anniversary of this podcast, but I present to you today a TJPS exclusive. Joining me in a second, or should I say joining me in the next segment, will be the president of the League of United Latin American Citizens, President Domingo Garcia. President Domingo Garcia will join me exclusively to discuss the death of Vanessa Guillen, a 20-year-old Latina American soldier. Now, according to various news reports, we all know how the story ends. Her body was eventually found. She was murdered by fellow soldiers. But how does her life begin? Where does it start? It starts 20 years ago. 20 years ago. On September 30th, 1999, Vanessa Guillen was born in Houston, Texas, the big, great, famous, and also popular American city. As she grew up, she dreamed of being in the United States Army and serving her country with faith, courage, and integrity. And she had been excellent in school. I mean, just fantastic. She played soccer, she enjoyed going to the gym, and also running with her friends. She was smart, she was strong, motivational, influential, a hard worker, and so much more. Jules Hernandez, one of her former teammates, said, quote, "I remember every day coming after school, she was always the first one out there running," end quote. But out of all of the goals she wanted to achieve in life, becoming a U.S. soldier was pretty high. It was pretty much at the top of her list. And she did it. She achieved that goal, and she became a U.S. soldier. Back in March, as the coronavirus pandemic started to inevitably affect our lives, our daily lives, things began to close down. And so Fort Hood, which is a base located in Killen, Texas, was one of them. Fort Hood closed on April 3rd, 2020, the following month, as the pandemic inevitably got worse. 19 days later, Vanessa Guillen sent her last text message to Army Specialist David Robinson, and she was last seen that day in a parking lot at the Regimental Engineer Squadron headquarters in Fort Hood. The next day, the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division received reports that Vanessa Guillen had gone missing. The day after that, on April 23rd, the Belton Police Department, along with other law enforcement officials, began searching for Vanessa. At this point, still nothing. No news reports of her. No new reports of her whatsoever. 2 days later, on April 26th, someone created the Find Vanessa Guillen Facebook page. Then, on April 27th, which is the next day, the Army Criminal Investigation Division offered a $15,000 reward for any information or insights on where she may be. Subsequently, on April 28th, the Army interviews Aaron Robinson about what he knew, and he claimed that he had no idea where she was and was with his girlfriend the whole night. That was a lie. Following that, 2 days later, the Secretary of the Army publicly addressed the situation about the disappearance of Vanessa Guillen. 8 days later, on May 7th, while the United States Army is still investigating this matter, they uncover a statement that could be delineated as potential sexual harassment. And after that brief investigation, they uncover another allegation. This time, it's verbal harassment involving the same individual. On May 15th, Vanessa Guillen's older sister, Myra, said she and her family had not received any information from the United States Army. According to USA Today's timeline of the story, on May 18th, quote, investigators interviewed 2 witnesses who say that on April 22nd, they saw Robinson pulling a large, tough box with wheels that appeared very heavy in weight out the arms room where he worked. The 2 witnesses said they observed Robinson load the tough box into his vehicle and drive away, end quote. So this starts to raise some questions, right? I mean, why was Robinson mysteriously carrying this box, and what was he doing with it? And more importantly, where was he taking this box? So the next day, Robinson agrees to let investigators search his phone, and they find that he made several calls to his girlfriend, Aguilar, on the night of April 22nd and early at 3:05 in the morning on April 23rd. Now those were the dates when the search had begun for Vanessa. That started to raise some questions. On May 23rd, someone starts a petition for the White House to hold the U.S. Army accountable for Vanessa Guillen's disappearance and also the current investigation. That petition received more than hundreds of thousands of signatures. The next month, on June 10th, Myra Guillen stated that her sister had told her and her family that she had been sexually harassed at Fort Hood, and she felt like she couldn't report it. And you know, at this point, it's been nearly 2 months since Vanessa has vanished. So there is enragement and a demand of more action. What is going on with the Army? Why haven't they provided any why haven't they provided any evidence or information to the family at this point? What is taking so long? What is going on? And so 2 days later, Vanessa's older sister, Myra, said this at a protest in Houston, Texas. She said, quote, I plead with you from the bottom of my heart to have compassion because she's my sister and I want her back, end quote. Once again, that was Myra Guillen, one of Vanessa's older sisters, in that clip, essentially expressing her enragement and emotion. On June 21st, the U.S. Army, along with law enforcement, found that box that Robinson secretly drove away. USA Today writes, quote, they found the burned remains of what appears to be the same tough box witnesses described Robinson leaving Fort Hood with on April 22nd. They also smelled something decomposing, but they did not find any human remains, end quote. 9 days later, the Army officially and finally begins looking into the sexual harassment allegations. On that same day, something else happened. Here's how the New York Times describes it, and I will warn you, this is unsettling, this is disturbing, and here we go. Quote, Mrs. Aguilar, I will remind you, is Robinson's girlfriend. Quote, Miss Aguilar said she helped Specialist Robinson dismember the body with an axe or hatchet and a machete-style knife, according to the complaint. The couple lit the remains on fire and buried them in 3 separate holes near the Leon River, the complaint said. Investigators told her to call Specialist Robinson. During the conversation, he denied doing anything to Specialist Guillen, end quote. Later on in that day, Robinson texted his girlfriend, and he sent her screenshots of news articles and recent news developments. Then later that evening, he texted her, quote, "They found the pieces," end quote. On July 1st, Robinson is confronted by law enforcement, and he thenceforth commits suicide. And his girlfriend is subsequently arrested the same day. On that same day, on the day that Robinson texted his girlfriend, quote, "They found the pieces," end quote. That was June 30th. And on that day, on June 30th, CNN, along with other various news organizations, reported that Vanessa Guillen had been found. They had found Vanessa Guillen. Law enforcement officials in the United States Army had found Vanessa Guillen's remains. Most recently, the Secretary of the Army announced that he would launch an independent investigation into the death of Vanessa Guillen. There are many questions that are being asked about the death of Vanessa Guillen, and these questions deserve clear, concise, and coherent answers of what transpired. I mean, just looking back on this from a chronological order, looking back on this now, the death of Vanessa Guillen and the disappearance of Vanessa Guillen, looking back on this now, there was, and there still is, local news coverage.
That's right. This growing mural speaks just how loved this soldier was. You can take a look behind me. This family is anything but alone. You can see every single person here had brought some kind of token of love. That's what they were instructed to do. And they want the family to know that they're praying for them.
New at 6, a march and vigil taking place in the Valley to demand justice for Vanessa Guillen. That started at the Oyo Hotel and Casino at 4:30. You can see small groups of people gathering there. Now, investigators say the Fort Hood soldier was killed and dismembered by a fellow soldier. For months, Guillen's family claims that the Army did not take her disappearance seriously. They're now calling for a congressional investigation.
Serena Roque writes in her blog post on Medium, quote, "Vanessa Guillen was a beautiful soldier whose life was stolen. She was hidden like a secret. She was mutilated like she meant nothing. But she did. She meant everything. She was living. She was breathing. The young soldier had so much life to live, so much to give. As a little girl, she dreamed of joining the Army to protect and serve, and yet nothing was done to protect her, to help her. More should have been done. Her story is one that makes everyone angry, sad, and left with sinking question, how could this happen? It feels so wrong because this should have never happened. As the spouse, child, parent, or friend of a sailor, airman, soldier, or any military personnel, you prepare yourself for the risk of them being deployed going into the unknown where something bad can happen. It is only recently that we realize our fear may never stop. We can no longer wake up in the morning with a sigh of relief because they're home and not deployed. We will continue to wake up with that same worry, with the same question, can this happen again? Now our fear isn't only out there, but it's here. This happened right here on American soil. Vanessa wasn't fighting a war. She was here, where she was supposed to feel safe, where she should have been protected. The Army failed her. End quote. Vanessa Guillen was only 20 years old. A young adult, only 20 years old. She would have turned 21 years old this September, but she did not get the chance to. She will be remembered for her service to this country and her patriotism. A little girl at the age of 10, living in Houston, Texas, knew what she wanted to be when she grew up. A soldier in the U.S. military. To fight, to serve, and protect. She achieved that goal. She became a soldier in the United States military, in the U.S. Army. She became that soldier. But she never got the chance to be promoted, or to live the rest of her life, or to kiss her loved ones goodbye. She didn't even get the chance to do that. She didn't know it was going to be her last day. She didn't know she was going to die of such a horrifying, diabolical death. She was only 20 years old. So much life, so much more to live, so many more years. She was 20 years old. A beautiful American soldier. 20 years old. Let that sink in. This is an ongoing story. I give my condolences to the family of Vanessa Guillen. This was wrong. This should never have transpired. This story breaks my heart, and it is painful to cover it. But I must, because Vanessa Guillen deserves justice. And questions will continue to be asked, and people deserve answers, especially the family of Vanessa Guillen. President Domingo Garcia of Lulac joins me next.
In this world where people are staying at home, many of life's moments are being put on hold. At Carvana, we understand that for some, getting a car just can't wait. That's why the new way to buy and sell a car is also the safer way. At Carvana, you can do it all 100% online from home, with a touchless delivery and pickup process to keep you safe. And for even greater peace of mind, all Carvana cars come with a 7-day return policy. So if you need to keep moving, it's our goal to keep you safe. Check out Carvana, the safer way to buy a car.
In 1914, her family had fled the Mexican Revolution, and she and her husband, Pedro Hernandez, moved to San Antonio in 1918 after he was drafted for World War I. After Armistice Day was declared, he shipped out and opened a grocery store and bakery on the city's west side to raise his family. In 1927, his wife Maria delivered babies in the community until the 1940s. Pedro Hernandez then formed the Protective Mothers Association. He raised money and built a maternity clinic that rendered prenatal care. They were both influential Hispanic activists, and so in 1929, Pedro and Maria Hernandez founded the League of United Latin American Citizens. It is the oldest and largest active organization for Latino political association here in the United States. According to their website, it says, quote, "The mission of the League of United Latin American Citizens is to advance the economic condition, educational attainment, political influence, housing, health, and civil rights of the Hispanic population of the United States," end quote. In August of 2018, Domingo Garcia was elected president of Lulac, winning 68% of the vote and becoming the 51st president of the organization. If you go on Lulac's website, you will find a large red bar across the top of the screen that reads, quote, "Support Vanessa Guillen's family," end quote. Vanessa Guillen dreamed of becoming a soldier in the U.S. military at 10 years old. Unfortunately, 10 years later, in that very position, she would be brutally murdered. She was only 20 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her, yet it was taken so abruptly. Joining me now is the president of the League of United Latin American Citizens, President Domingo Garcia. Thank you for coming on the show.
No, glad to be there. And like I said, Lulac since 1929 has been fighting for the civil rights of Latinos and all Americans to make sure that everybody gets equality and opportunity and justice. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. My first question is, when you first learned of the death of Vanessa Guillen, what was going through your head at that time?
Well, our local Lulac Council in Killeen, Texas, where Fort Hood is based, contacted us and said there's a mother who was really concerned because her daughter's been missing for about 3 weeks and nobody in the base is giving her any answers or telling her what's going on. And I said, well, that's kind of unusual. That's the largest military base in the United States, one of the most secure areas in the United States. A soldier just can't go missing. You know, if a gun or any equipment goes missing, they lock down the entire base until that is found. So when you have a young private, a woman, that should have been a red flag. Hey, something's wrong. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to, it got my attention, and we started having protests every Friday at 4 o'clock at the entrance to Fort Hood. And I spoke to the mother, and I spoke to her sister, and they were just extremely concerned about Vanessa's disappearance.
Mm. One of the news reports that caught my eye is when you essentially stated that Latinas should not enlist in the U.S. military. Why did you decide to make that statement at the time?
Well, because we saw that the military was denying and lying to the family of, a woman who had put on the uniform of the United States, who was agreed to serve our country, and yet who was not being protected by her superiors, who she had complained about sexual harassment and issues. And, she was found brutally murdered by fellow officers and soldiers. And we don't know where this is going yet. And we found on her hashtag, I am Vanessa Guillen, over 1,000 other women who have been in the military, are in the military, who said they've been raped, abused, harassed, and the military has done nothing. The Army has done nothing about those complaints. So we just wanted to give a warning to parents and to young women willing to join the military. You might not be protected there. Things have to change.
Do you think that the United States Army took the disappearance of Vanessa Guillen seriously while they were conducting their investigation?
All we know is they weren't transparent. They didn't give information to the family. I mean, they took a national campaign and protests, demonstrations, and vigils to find out the truth. And that shouldn't be that way. Every young person, every soldier should be able to get justice. And the families of those soldiers should be given information and support instead of being blocked and denied information. And that was just a miscarriage of justice in this case.
According to Vanessa Guillen's family, she was being sexually harassed, as you stated, by one of her superiors. Why do you think Vanessa feared of reporting this information?
What we found out is that women who have complained about being raped or abused in the military are dissuaded and sometimes are retaliated against by superior officers. And it's a very macho, male-dominated organization. And women's voices have been basically muffled and dissuaded. And that's something that has to change. I met with the Secretary of the Army last Friday. He assured me that they're going to have an independent panel investigate, and also the protocols and procedures so that women feel safe making their complaints, and that there will be real consequences to anybody who's perpetuating that type of abuse.
How strong is your faith that justice will be served for Vanessa?
I was really pleasantly surprised that the Secretary of the Army took the time to call us and meet with us and agreed to have an independent panel. We were recommended some very strong Latinas. One's a former prosecutor, another one's former Marine, colonel, to serve and to make some tough recommendations to change that good old boy format that is in the Army and that is abusing women and not giving them the justice they deserve when abuses do occur.
President Trump is expected to meet with the family of Vanessa Guillen later in the month. What's your perspective on that news?
Well, the president's office contacted Lulac about contacting the family. We hope to arrange that. I'm hopeful that if there's a silver lining out of this, is that we come up with some real reforms and changes to protect women in our armed forces, and that the president, along with Congress, makes the laws and changes necessary to make that happen. And the Vanessa Guillen law will be and honor her memory by protecting women in the future.
Are you confident that a full-scale investigation will be conducted to get to the bottom of what happened?
We have heard that Congress is coming forward with their own congressional investigation. We expect a vote in the next couple of weeks, And so I'm pretty confident there will be an investigation and hearings will be held in Washington regarding her murder and disappearance and those responsible beyond the guy who committed suicide.
Yesterday, one of the accomplices in this murder pled not guilty in court for the murder of Vanessa Guillen. What's your perspective on this astonishing news?
We're going to let the justice system work its way. Everybody has a right to trial and to plead their case, but we're pretty sure that this is the one remaining accomplice knows what happened and knows maybe the parties responsible and maybe who ordered her murder.
Most recently, the mayor of Houston, Texas, declared July 11th Vanessa Guillen Day, and the mayor of Austin, Texas, has done the same, except it's on July 11th. What do you think of these local efforts to honor the life of this innocent soldier?
Well, Vanessa's story touched a lot of people all over the country and internationally. This could have been anybody's daughter, anybody's sister, and the fact that she was serving her country, and that very memorable picture of her in her Army uniform that she was proud to serve, and then wasn't protected, has touched a lot of hearts. And hopefully the announcements by Mayor Turner in Houston and the mayor of Austin recognizing her service and also the tragedy are important steps to helping the family heal and all the people that have been following the case.
As far as the perpetrators in this case, is there a possibility that they could have been arrested sooner as far as the death of this soldier?
There's been big time gross negligence on the part of the military there. They originally listed Vanessa as AWOL. They didn't do anything for almost 4 weeks. And even though they found her keys to her vehicle, her purse, her IDs, all in her locker, they wrote it off as an AWOL. And I think that's just, again, grossly negligent on their part. And they could criminals and maybe save their life if they had acted sooner, within 24 hours of her disappearance, instead of blocking and denying the family information and denying that maybe her disappearance was due to foul play and criminal conduct.
Well, why do you think sexual harassment and assault are taken as a joke in the military, especially for those who sign up to defend this country, especially females?
Because the military is such a male warrior culture. The concept is that, there was a woman soldier who said, it's the price of admission. You go through sort of this period of abuse by men, and that's just totally wrong. Women deserve the same equal treatment, the dignity and respect as everybody else. And those soldiers who abuse that privilege, who abuse their authority, need to be punished and held accountable. And that system of silence by the other soldiers needs to be done away with. The fact of the matter is, bad things happen when good people don't do anything. And the good men who believe in respecting women and treating women with respect need to step up where they see abuse occurring.
Another soldier's remains were reportedly discovered at Fort Hood. Is there a possibility that this base could be shut down for these recent disappearances?
Well, Lulac has asked that the 3rd Cavalry Unit be disbanded because there's been 2 murders. Private Morales' remains were found. Another soldier, they said, went AWOL, even though he had been there in the Army 6 years, only had 3 months on his enlistment, and nobody ever looked for him. And they found his remains accidentally while looking for Vanessa's. And then we found out that there's been 3 other soldiers killed at Fort Bragg, murdered. So that's 5. And a prostitution ring that was unearthed last year, which resulted in another commanding officer getting 2 years in prison for trying to prostitute privates at the fort. So there's something rotten at this particular location and needs to be fixed, and that we need outside investigators.
Are you confident that a congressional investigation opened into this matter will really reveal some of the disgusting details behind this situation?
Well, it remains to be seen. I'm cautiously optimistic that Congress will do the right thing, make the changes, protect the women, and uphold the values of the military, the Constitution, and our
we are experiencing some technical difficulties here. It appears that we have lost President Domingo Garcia. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show.
At a time when we're asked to sacrifice, we step up to do our part. On the home front, on the front lines, to lend a helping hand and hold each other up. We are resilient, vigilant, and we'll get through this because we're better together, even if we're a little farther apart.
Welcome back. I'm here again with the president of the League of United Latin American Citizens. He joins me again. We had a little bit of interruption there, but he is back on. Mr. President, my last question is, what is your message to the family of Vanessa Guillen and those who have been sexually assaulted in the U.S. military?
That when we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and we say with liberty and justice for all, we mean all. That includes, a young woman from a working class family who volunteered to serve her country and who tragically was killed, and that we're going to find justice. And her memory is going to be that changes are going to be made so that that hopefully will never happen again to another young woman or man who serves our military. And if it does, the people responsible will be held accountable and justice will be served. And that is something that we hope to do with the family. She's going to be buried on July 25th. We expect full military honors and her memory to live on in terms of the fight against abuse of women in the military, to have a positive ending.
All right. Once again, my guest is President Domingo Garcia. He's the president of the League of United Latin American Citizens. President Garcia, thank you for coming on the show and sharing your perspective.
Thank you.
All right. The last note is up ahead.
Hey, Google.
More than 100 billion words are translated every day.
Lift your hand.
Thank you very much for your help.
ご助力ありがとうございます。
Words about food. Words about friendship. About sport. About belief. About fear.
Oh my God.
Words that can hurt and sometimes divide. But every day, the most translated words in the world are "How are you?" "Thank you." And "I love you."
Vanessa Guillen was a soldier. She was a soccer player. She was smart. She was influential. She was motivational, and she was inspiring. At 10 years old, a little girl in Houston, Texas, by the name of Vanessa Guillen knew what she wanted to be. She knew that she wanted to be a soldier in the United States military. She achieved that goal, and she got there. Unfortunately, she was brutally murdered in that position. Vanessa Guillen will be remembered. She was 20 years old. So beautiful and young. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Jeremiah Patterson Show. Please join me on July 19th, 2020, which will be the anniversary of this podcast. Have a great day and see you then.